Blockchain Show is a podcast that demystifies cryptocurrencies and distributed ledger technology.
Hello there, blockchain fans, and it's another great episode here with Ian, Ethan, and today we've got Martin. Martin, hello.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Not a problem, Martin. Now, before we find out why you're here, Martin, and what you're going to tell us, you're in Slovenia, and I imagine many of our listeners don't know much about Slovenia. So just tell us what's the weather like and what can you see out of your window?
Actually, right now I'm sitting in a basement, so not much out there. It's 6 p.m. o'clock here. It's around 10 degrees. And yeah, I'm sitting in Slovenia. It's a very nice little country around hour drive from Venice, which I think most people know where it is. So that's the easiest way to kind of locate it.
That's the city that's basically sinking, and that's why they haven't got any roads.
Exactly. Might be that blockchain will help somehow. I don't know how, but we'll see.
Well, there we go. That'll be coming to a blockchain show soon. How blockchain is going to save Venice. Exactly.
Are you guys part of the European Union?
Yeah, I think we joined in 2004. So we are part of the Yugoslavia, the biggest socialist country before, and then we kind of separated as the first country from that in 1991. So we are independent for, I would say, 28 years. And then in 2004, we joined the European Union, and we have the euro currency. We don't have any borders, so you don't even have to have a passport to go all the way, to Germany, or whatever. So that's kind of a good thing. But at the same time, when you're so small as we are, because you need around hour and a half to drive from one point of the country to the other. The good thing is that everybody knows everybody, and you have this nice ecosystem where everything evolves very fast. At the same time, you're not important enough in a world economy, to make any real difference. So a lot of good people leave the country or they find opportunities elsewhere. But yeah.
Such a different perspective from what I'm used to. You said it takes an hour and a half to get across the country. It takes me like an hour and a half just to get to Hollywood. So that's amazing. And, there's probably like close to, 25 million people just in the Los Angeles metropolitan area. I think most of those people don't even really know about blockchain or, maybe Bitcoin. Sometimes I get a little discouraged. There's so much opportunity. And it feels like in this country, at least, some of these bigger corporations that can really do something, that big tech companies that could develop something that people could, something that would be easier to be adopted by the masses, I guess what I'm trying to say. It just seems like a lot of people, either they don't know or they don't care. And we're kind of going through an important, but almost like a subtle takeover of the blockchain. It's not really an industry, but I call it the blockchain space. And also you were talking about borders, and here in this country we've got basically two borders. There's Mexico, and the president here wants to build a wall, and then you got up north Canada. They actually clear cut the border so you can just walk right. It's just they cut the trees in a nice line, so if you wanted, you could just walk across. I'm sure the Canadian police would come and talk to you, but it's just a completely crazy opposites going on here. And
exactly, if you're Mexican, you fly to Canada and then walk over the border.
I totally, I've been spending quite a lot of time in the Bay Area in the last year or so. So I think San Francisco also have these pronounced extremes from, the one of the most wealthy people living on the same street as you see camping equipment and homeless people basically at the entrance where billionaires live. So I think we do have a little bit better situation in Europe regarding those extremes. Comparing to what you mentioned, that just in the Los Angeles area there's 25 million people. Our whole country is 2 million people. It was October 2017, every petrol station in the country you could buy Bitcoin. And not just, behind the counter, they had big billboards, digital billboards outside saying buy Bitcoin here. So that's kind of an advantage if you're small when the news goes around. I don't know if it was for a good or for a bad. Yeah, it's you can see a little bit different situation.
It's interesting what's actually happening in Europe compared to America, Canada. It seems like America is going backwards in some respects. And then you've got Europe forging forward because Europe is a split number of countries, then a common currency makes a lot of difference, and it makes things a lot easier. And so the fact that cryptocurrency comes in and can be used, it must be much easier to create a business case for cryptocurrency in Europe compared to like in the mainland United States.
Yes, definitely. Like even from the perspective of how they treat cryptocurrency. So most of the European countries, they don't even treat it as, as a security or even as an asset, they don't even know what it is. So they try to fit it into different frameworks. Our company is actually incorporated in Gibraltar, and they're very, very favorable to that. I don't mean from a tax perspective, but in a sense that you can actually talk to people that are tightly connected to the government, and they give you a framework and they say, look, if you do X, this will fall into this Y column, and it will be all fine if you do as we say, and then you follow lawyers, and it all kind of makes sense. I do think the advantage mostly comes from these smaller, more independent countries, so like Malta, Gibraltar, and independent territories like Isle of Man, where they do have a framework from, let's say, a commons law, but they can bend it their way to be more, I guess, flexible for the new innovations.
More advantageous, yes. And we all know what happens if you try and stabilize your currency based on other people's currencies, like they did in England for a few days, and then they completely reversed the decision back in the back in the late 80s. Exactly. Anyway, Martin, tell us what you do and why you're on the show and why you're in a basement.
Right. I own a company. I'm a co-founder of a company called Verity. So we're in this blockchain space. Before we were in a chatbot space. I actually come from a developer's environment, been developing for 15 years, then went into studying biomedical engineering, so totally something different, and then went into chatbots and blockchain a few years ago. So the company, it's called Verity, and it's a decentralized Oracle solution, which means we're solving the problem of how to get trusted data from the real world into the smart contracts. So smart contracts are this immutable way of how to code contracts on blockchain. And the main problem is how can these contracts interact with real world? So if you have insurance contracts, if you have sports betting, healthcare, voting systems, you somehow need to get outside data into those contracts for them to actually be usable. And that's kind of what we're solving. We have a one interesting approach to that problem through wisdom of the crowd. And I'm here to kind of discuss, I guess, oracles and how that fits into the bigger idea of blockchain.
Okay. So first of all, I'm imagining our listener here is sitting in their grey Audi A4 driving home from work, and they're thinking now, oh my gosh, they've mentioned smart contracts. What I can't remember. Why is that different from a normal contract? Can you just go over the basics on that side of things before we delve deep into oracles and the contract side of things?
Yeah, sure. So as you know, blockchain kind of started with Bitcoin, and Bitcoin, what it solved was, how can I do a transaction where I don't need to trust anybody, any intermediary like a bank? So if I can do a transaction like in a peer-to-peer environment, so me to John and John to Alice, and how can we trust each other that those transactions will actually happen and who owns what? So Bitcoin kind of solved that in a very ingenious way. And then we can kind of see that as a phase one, and then phase two was Ethereum in 2014, which brought smart contracts and programmable language onto the blockchain. So what it means is that we went from very basic functionality of how can I pay somebody without a bank, without fees being in between, and now we went into can I code a normal contract like a will or a lending contract or an insurance contract and put that on blockchain so nobody can alter it. There is no intermediary, there is no insurance company behind it, there is no big banks behind it that can control and stop execution of that contract. So what we now have is a capability, it's an ecosystem where normal contracts written on paper can now be stored on blockchain where nobody can change and stop their execution. So this becomes very, very powerful where you think about a world which what we believe in as well, that in maybe 10, 20, 30 years, a lot of this stuff will actually happen without big companies that can create frauds and take money and steal money behind the doors. So now you have paper contracts being on blockchain where nobody can kind of stop them, and they will execute as it was written. So you can also imagine as a normal programming language that's being integrated and fused into the blockchain.
Fabulous. Okay, so you mentioned oracles there. Can you tell us more about that side of things?
Yeah, sure. So kind of I mentioned smart contracts in a way that you can now build a normal insurance contract or a lending contract, and you put that into the blockchain, and now creates this opportunity for new kinds of businesses, for preventing fraud, for being more effective and cheaper. But what this also creates is a problem, because if those smart contracts live in the decentralized environment like Ethereum blockchain, which means we believe that thousands and thousands of servers or so-called nodes around the world actually verify that execution of those smart contracts cannot be falsified. What we do have a problem is how can we get those contracts to communicate with the outside world? If, for example, I want to do an insurance smart contract which automatically pays out if, for example, I have a car crash, right? So I create this smart contract, or some company creates a smart contract, it removes this fees, it's much faster, it's much more effective than what we have today. But this contract needs to know if my accident happened, or when to pay out, or how much of a premium I should pay. So kind of a lot of this information needs to come from the outside world, and that's what's called an oracle problem. Kind of relates back to the oracle in ancient Greece, which was a fortune teller. But in blockchain environment, is basically an ingredient that verifies the outside data and brings it into the blockchain. So that's kind of an oracle.
Fabulous. So how did you get involved in this? I know you said about you started off with the smart bots, but was this just working out how you could make money from Bitcoin, or was it more technology side of things about how it all worked?
Yeah, it's more from the tech side. And of course, we're all entrepreneurs, so there's money involved. You know, you make some value in some product, and then you want to make money out of it. That's I don't think anybody else saying anything else would be a lie. But it actually started early, I think 2016. So my previous company, we were building chatbots. So anybody that don't know what a chatbot is, it's like a little robots that you can talk to. So like a AI-powered conversational agents, what they call them, and I think you might even interact with some of them on Facebook Messenger or WeChat or any other kind of messaging application. So we were building a chatbot that was a fantasy league chatbot. So what it means was that people actually use our little robot to watch football games and at the same time try to predict the scores of that football match. So they were basically interacting with other people, trying to predict, trying to compete who will be the best, who will make the best prediction of the football game while they were watching a live football game on the TV. So we were doing that. It was a very nice product. We actually went to a few thousands of active users in the first few months. The problem we had was that we had to pay for the delivery of sports data. So in order for that chatbot to work, we needed to know what's happening in real time in a football game. So how you do that, you actually pay big companies tens of thousands. In our case, it was even up to $100,000 to have access to this data through an API to get information what's happening in real time in a football match. So that was when we were in that project for a few months, and then when it clicked that why shouldn't we just use humans that already watch those games, our users, right? We have hundreds of thousands, even millions of people watching football games, and they have access to this data, so they know what's happening because they're watching the game. So they could be one reporting what's happening on that day on that game. We use a consensus. So if, for example, 20 people say the goal was just reached, we can take that as a truth and then use that as a free data in our product. So it all kind of starts with that. How can we empower people to monetize the data they already have access to? And then we started creating quite complex algorithms behind that force people to kind of provide the right data and prevented fraud and so on. So that kind of kickstarted the whole thing.
That's an interesting use case. And here on the Blockchain Show, we love it when people actually start something which is based on a passion, because that has so much more gravitas and it has a greater ability to grow because there's a passion behind it. It's not just making money. And the chatbot thing is very interesting. I've been reading a legal report about where you stand legally on what a chatbot has said to somebody. And how is the law going to be able to determine artificial intelligence and what artificial intelligence says? And it was the first thing in my inbox this morning was, I don't know if you've seen it or any of our listeners, but NVIDIA has created an AI Paint program. So it's like Microsoft Paint.
I saw it. It looks like Microsoft Paint, though.
It looks like Microsoft Paint, but you basically say, put the rocks here, put the ground here, put the tree here, and it just puts all the detail in. It's basically Bob Ross in an art package, and it will just create an absolute masterpiece for you just based upon a simple Microsoft Paint thing. So that link should be underneath the podcast, depending on where you got it from. So I think that's a very interesting area to go into. And I definitely know AI with machine learning and the blockchain will mean that there'll be so much automation. And speaking of automation, there's a lot of talk at the moment, especially on some mainstream TV shows in the US, about jobs and whether this new technology revolution as we enter the aqua age where we become submerged in data. And people like Gartner say 48% of jobs will disappear. Other people say, well, new jobs will spring up, a bit like every single computing age in the past. And we can take this back to the Bronze Age when suddenly people weren't making weapons out of stone and suddenly there's bronze and people had to reskill. It's the same here. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I actually just read an article today about a Japan company, basically an e-commerce giant akin to Amazon, has ordered that each and every of 60,000, I think it was 60,000 employees, will need to go through a basic developers programming course. So it's kind of very interesting to me, like 60,000 people will now need to learn, I think it was Java, so entry Java and networking. And this is not a small course, it's a 6-month course. So what they're saying is basically no matter what's your current role, you need to know how to code. So I think it's happening much faster than we think. So I would guess we are walking into this what I call a geeky age, where a geek was somebody behind a computer all day, and he was kind of an outcast, and now everybody that will not be geeky in a sense that won't know how to operate and code and interact with programs in a more advanced way, they will be left out. So yeah, I do agree that I do think that a lot of jobs will be left out. A lot of people will lose their jobs. But I also do think that we will need to adopt, and I don't know if it's for better or for worse. It will bring new developments, and so I do agree. I think people will need to learn new skills, and even in our company, like marketing department, where we have around 3 or 4 people, depending if you count the growth in it as well. Those marketing people are spending 24/7 being on computers, trying to design sometimes even algorithms on how to optimize the sell, how to optimize marketing funnels, how to optimize A/B testing on ads. There is no classical marketing. It's all very very tech and skilly. But I do think that there's also other roles from social sciences that will be more and more desirable in that age where everybody will just be coding, because because we kind of lose that sense of how we are still people, we are still social beings, and how we interact with the world, which will be more and more weird with the whole AI and VR bubble that we will live in. So I think the social sciences will kind of have a new revolution in the coming years.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the way we interact with people is changing. And I was only thinking today about how 20 years ago they were predicting global warming and climate change, but nobody really predicted the change which would happen because of social media and how our whole lives are consumed, and how people will be using Facebook not realizing that they're just being sold to and marketed to. And yeah, the statistics are horrifying, but even when you know the statistics, you still can't put Facebook down, because it's always funny to see what your old classmate or class bully's doing these days, which is interesting. So you can probably offer us another viewpoint. So from your view, and I know you've traveled worldwide and spoken worldwide, how do you feel Europe is embracing and using blockchain compared to America and other such big countries outside of Europe?
So I think the biggest difference I've noticed is that, so my experience is mostly a lot of European countries that I've been to different conferences or had interactions with either investors or clients or other blockchain projects, involves mostly France, UK, Germany, Gibraltar, Slovenia, and so on. And then on the other side of the pond, I've been mostly in the Bay Area. So I think the biggest difference is that still the venture capital and approach to funding is fundamentally different than that you can still see the Silicon Valley approach here. So when you're in San Francisco, the funds there, they still kind of believe in this. They're nurturing ideas. You can get a pre-seed or even a seed round up to $2-3 million, almost based on an idea. So I've seen startups raising $1 million on a spreadsheet, growth hacking the hell out of that thing, but just having zero product and zero customers. So from that perspective, it's much easier to get funds for a blockchain project in US, even though a lot of people, that's my experience, a lot of people have maybe different experiences. At the same time, in Europe, you might get smaller rounds, but the ecosystem of acceleration programs, incubators, and all of that, I think it's now overtaken the US in a sense that you can go to Berlin and there is at least 2 different incubators you can go on, and then you go to Munich and Frankfurt and Paris and there is all in Vienna, and there's always an organization or a big fund, a big incubator from more well-known companies like Deloitte and IBM that are nurturing those ideas. So I do think that we are kind of everything is a little bit slowed down in Europe, but we do have more projects that have better, not maybe better, but more evolved in
their idea, and they actually have products. Even though we have some magnificent minds from the Bay Area, so a lot of blockchain experts I've met are actually from the US. So I think it's just a little bit different perspective
from the funding, and that would be the biggest difference. Otherwise, I do think that blockchain is a very, very global thing. So when I'm traveling the world, I'm actually meeting same people everywhere I go. Same conference in Paris. Next week, I was 2 weeks ago. A week ago. I was in Hong Kong. I met the same people. I'm flying to San Francisco. I'm meeting the same people. So I think blockchain is a very global phenomenon. It's a global idea that I think can really change the way we live, and not in a sense that we can just send money without banks, which is great and big in its own way, but it will change the way we live, the way we have democracy, the way we use healthcare systems, the way we vote, and I do think that's very global. So I don't think there is much difference in that from Europe to US.
I've got you, and there is a phenomenal documentary which I think everybody should see. It's about a company called Theranos, in America, and how this dropout graduate, Elizabeth Holmes, deceived people. Well, I'm not sure. Her company was worth $9 billion, and they didn't even have a product. And now it's worth nothing, and she's worth nothing. But it's incredible that the woman just wore black all the time, like Steve Jobs. She lowered her voice so people would believe her more, which just made her, it's incongruent. It just didn't work. There was just something weird, and she hardly ever blinked. It was just, it's bizarre. There's a documentary in America. I'd look it up. It's fascinating about not only how she did it, but also how people believed her, and how nobody did any
really
good due diligence or triage on the whole process. It was crazy.
And also the interesting part was how the media really, grabbed onto that story. She was headlining Forbes magazine. She was named top 30 under 30 for the Forbes. She was Wall Street Journal. She was on the front page and stuff like that. So you can see how people are just jumping at one opportunity to promote what it's like a ship, everybody is just promoting what they see it's working right now and what's hot. I think that kind of goes back to, I think you mentioned at the beginning of our talk, how we kind of live in this, what I call disinformation age, where there's just too much information and too little truth.
Exactly. And we did an interview about that just about a year ago, where there was a news company starting up, and they were using the blockchain to store news stories and to validate them through their various people spread around the world, which is very interesting, and that'll be something we'll be exploring soon. But you're right. Everything we read now, we have to say, well, is that true? Has that actually happened? And we spend longer trying to find out if it's true than actually reading the article. So I think people have given up on the news, and now they're listening to their own opinions, and that means that you get people creating their own opinions, and now you can't challenge people in a bar or in the street. Nobody has discussions about things anymore. This used to happen like 20, 30 years ago. People would have a discussion and people would understand other people's point of view, and we all agree to disagree, but at least I understand your point of view. Now it's just turned into a match of just who can shout the loudest or who can come up with the best insult. And yes, it's not good for society. And especially when we've got people like the President of the United States talking about fake news all the time, if he was that concerned about it, he'd do something about it. So I don't know where this is going to end up. I think that there are real problems. And this is the same in Europe. And that's why Great Britain at the moment is facing a Brexit, because there was misinformation. They lied in the campaign to try and get people to vote leave. And then when everybody did vote leave, they went, oh, that's a surprise. And I read an analogy about it, if anybody's interested. I'm sure you are. That it's a bit like two people in a nightclub, and your buddy says, you know what, we should go to this other place, it'd be far better. And you go, okay then. And you go outside, and suddenly your buddy says, I don't know where to go. We can't get back in the club. So effectively, what England is doing is it's 2 a.m. They're in a kebab shop at the moment, arguing about whose fault it is, and they're not in any club. So yeah, I think that about covers it. It's a good one, and it's certainly something which a lot of Americans ask me about, and I just say it's the same as everything that's happening worldwide. There's a lot of misinformation. People aren't listening to the information which is bland and boring. They're listening to the most sensationalized things. And if we think about everything we've read over the last 5 days, most of the stuff we read is because of a sensational headline. Click here to see the wildebeest of da-da-da-da-da doing this. And then you open it and it's like, well, that headline doesn't really fit. It happens a lot, and I'm guilty of it as well. But I do try and question everything and just take on board things which are really happening. And I think what's happening now is a lot of satire programs like John Oliver Tonight, which are actually making satire of the news, are actually news channels that people believe because they're telling the truth now. So the comedy programs are telling the truth, and the news stations aren't telling the truth. So it's a very confused world we live in. And thank God we've got things like the NVIDIA Paint program just to make our lives happy and to create masterpieces.
Yeah.
Exactly. And hopefully this means people will actually get off their phones and actually do something about it, such as yourself, and be inspired. Anyway, where can we find out more about your organization and your progress?
Yeah, I think the easiest way is just kind of visit our website at verity.network, and we kind of encourage people to also join what's called the marketplace, where they can earn cryptocurrencies by doing simple tasks like looking at the images, reading news, trying to detect if a news is fake or not, or just watching a football game and typing in what's the score they see on the TV screen. So we try to kind of bridge the borders of current blockchain adoption by bringing in new people so they can earn money for the data and the time they already have. And on the other side, we are solving this disinformation problem and trying to do something good with the blockchain. So yeah, I just encourage people to visit Verity.network.
Verity.network. Okay, and Ethan, we need to make this episode click here to earn cryptocurrency. We need something, because I love that phrase, and that was something with the Minds.com network when we spoke to them about that. The fact that you can earn cryptocurrency doing something, this is fabulous news. And it's another way we can pretend we're getting rich by playing with our computers and doing stuff.
Exactly.
Excellent. Ethan, have you got any questions?
No, man. I just wanted to thank you for your time. And Martin, give you the opportunity to say anything that maybe we haven't had the chance to ask you yet.
No, I think we kind of covered fun ideas and questions, and I think very important questions. No, I just wanted to kind of add that, like I said before, that I think blockchain is much bigger than people think, and it's not about prices and people having Lambos. And not a lot of people say that, but I think blockchain will really fundamentally change the way we live. If we can get this ecosystem to be mature, to have trusted data is what we also work on, be scalable and all of that, it can change the way we think about healthcare, the way we think about doing insurance, or even fun stuff like gaming and gambling. So yeah, I do think that everybody should take a look into blockchain and share the word.
Absolutely. Martin, thank you for being on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure and entertaining.
Thank you for having me. It's very nice.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you. It's been good to chat to you. You're an entertaining person, and I'll be looking out for you on my travels as well. And thank you, the listener, for downloading. And if you are still listening to this, please tweet us, find us on Facebook. And if you want me to do an interview with somebody from IBM after all those lovely words I've said about IBM in the past, then please let us know. We might have an opportunity to speak to one of their blockchain people to find out what they're doing. They've been in the news quite a lot at the moment, so I might as well stick my head in the guillotine and find out what IBM have been doing and be prepared to eat my own words. So please give us some feedback on that. Apart from that, stay subscribed, get your friends to subscribe, and get to Verity Network and have a look, sign up, and start using it today. Thank you.